there are a lot of people in Michigan who are fans of both the Michigan Wolverines for college and in the NFL, the Detroit Lions. Let's just say after this report, you might be feeling a little bit conflicted right about now. Welcome everybody to JG9 News. We talk all things NFL all the time. I'm Joe O'Gara9 representing the 904 from the 602, and today we are talking about the NFL draft taking place in a few weeks and some rumors that are potentially developing right now with pick number 4, which is when a lot of people think the draft will officially start. Obviously, the first 3 picks have a pretty good feeling they're going to be quarterbacks. Caleb Williams going number 1 overall to the Chicago Bears. Pick number 2 held by the Commanders. You figure they're taking Drake May out of UNC or Jaden Daniels out of LSU, the Arizona State transfer. One of those two, probably May, and whoever they don't take, the New England Patriots will snatch at number 3. Pick 4 with the Arizona Cardinals is where the draft begins for a lot of people, but the Cardinals might not hold the number 4 pick when all is said and done, because it looks like they might be trading down with a team that needs a quarterback, the Minnesota Vikings. This according to Pretty Ricky, an insider who has been incredibly accurate with everything that has happened this past week. He broke the Calvin Ridley news as it was happening. He called the Tennessee Titans as a potential team. He called the Brian Burns move as it was happening. He is tapped in, I don't know how he is, but he is tapped into everything taking place in the NFL. And Pretty Ricky says, in a recent report, been saying and hearing that the Broncos love JJ McCarthy, that is, and that the Vikings have been having considerable talks with the Cardinals about the 4th pick. The Vikings are the current favorites betting-wise to land JJ McCarthy, followed by the Giants and the Broncos. He then adds, there is no rush to get these done right now, but teams like to know if they have the capital to make a move. Most teams do due diligence calls, but I am hearing that the Cardinals and Vikings had momentum in getting something done. The Minnesota Vikings obviously need a quarterback. They lost Kirk Cousins to the Atlanta Falcons in free agency. They signed Sam Darnold to a 1-year deal worth $10 million. I talked about that, why that signing doesn't even make a whole lot of sense, how it might have screwed them out of a compensatory pick in 2026 potentially, a 3rd-round compensatory pick because you lost Danielle Hunter. Also, go check that out if you haven't already. I'll leave a link in the upper right corner and a link in the description below. But here's the thing. For the Vikings, look, if you like your quarterback, this makes sense to trade it from 11 to 4. This makes sense. I want to talk about this from the perspective of the Arizona Cardinals, because I'm not quite sure what necessarily the Cardinals are thinking here, and if this move makes a ton of sense for them. Now, you have to remember that last year, the Cardinals were in a very similar spot. They had the number 3 overall pick, and they traded down because Paris Johnson, the offensive tackle, was always their guy, and they knew they could get him. So they got a pick in the process as a result. They knew the Colts were taking a QB at number 4. They knew that the Seattle Seahawks weren't going offensive line with pick number 5. They knew that the Houston Texans were trading off of Will Anderson at pick number 3. So they knew they were going to get Paris Johnson. So it worked out there, and he was very, very good for Arizona last year. He's going to be an anchor on that offensive line for years to come. But we all know the Arizona Cardinals have a massive need right now at wide receiver. They really don't have any great wide receivers on that team, and they need to make a lot of moves to improve that unit for Kyler Murray and company. Right now, obviously, Hollywood Brown is a free agent. He might not be coming back next year. You got Greg Dortch, you got Rondale Moore. There's not a lot of guys available in free agency unless you could trade for T. Higgins. Maybe Mike Williams, you can sign him. But everyone's been linking the Cardinals to a wide receiver since before the start of the 2024 season, before the start of the 2023 season, let alone 2024. And it seemed like Marvin Harrison Jr. was a lock to go to Arizona. But if this move is true, obviously they're not going to be able to get Marvin Harrison Jr. because they'll have pick number 11, courtesy of the Minnesota Vikings. Now, here's the thing with the Cardinals. If you view Marvin Harrison Jr. in a tier of his own, you don't make this move. You don't make this move if you view Marvin Harrison Jr. as the only blue-chip wide receiver in this draft. Having said that, if you view him as comparable to Neighbors and Rome, it makes sense to make a trade like this to some degree. Because the massive problem for the Cardinals is that there are a bunch of teams ahead of you that are desperate at that wide receiver position. A bunch of teams, just to name a few. Obviously, right now at number 4, you'll have the first pick of any non-quarterback. But if you trade down to 11, look at the New York Giants. They supposedly like JJ McCarthy. But if they miss out on him as a result of this trade, they might take a wide receiver. they might take a wide receiver because right now you got Darius Slayton, Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson, a lot of question marks, and they pick number 6. You also have the Chicago Bears. They have no receivers on that team outside of DJ Moore. Obviously, this is not a knock on DJ Moore in the slightest bit because he was great last year. 96 catches, 1,364 yards, 8 touchdowns, basically stole him from the Carolina Panthers. Having said that, though, outside of him, you've got absolutely no one. The top receiver on the team that is still with the Bears, not counting DJ Moore, is Tyler Scott, who had 168 yards receiving. You lost Darnell Mooney to the Atlanta Falcons with pick number 9. And on top of that, you got DJ Moore, Tyler Scott with 168 yards, and he is the only other wideout on the team currently with over 20 yards receiving last year. The Bears desperately need some help at wide receiver, especially if they draft a rookie quarterback, if they draft Caleb Williams, like a lot of people expected with pick 101. They need a wide receiver badly. You need to surround him with talent. That could be a possibility of pick number 9 for them to take a wideout. And now you lost out on one of the other 3. The New York Jets no longer have a giant need on the offensive line since they got Morgan Moses from the Baltimore Ravens. They're trying to get the Cowboys tackle Smith, and that is according to Pretty Ricky. They think they can land him. And if you get Smith and Moses, you're set at tackle. You don't need to draft a tackle. But they need a wide receiver badly because they have no one at wide receiver outside of Garrett Wilson. Obviously, Garrett Wilson, one of the best receivers in football. He was great in his rookie season when he won Offensive Rookie of the Year. Was very good last year, too. Just didn't have any quarterback help. They look at the other receivers on the team. Alan Lazard's probably your second best guy. He was a massive disappointment last year. You don't want to feature Xavier Gibson a ton since he's your punt returner. The Jets are ahead of you in the draft order with pick number 10. And they have to look at the other teams that could potentially leapfrog you at 11 and not have to do a whole lot. Like the Denver Broncos are one pick behind at pick number 12. Maybe they can leapfrog you at pick number 11 because they need help at wide receiver. Obviously, Tim Patrick, massive injury concerns. Cortland Sutton could get traded. You lost Jerry Jeudy. You traded him away, which I think was the right move. Don't get me wrong. But you have holes if you're Denver, and they could leapfrog you at pick 11. So if the Cards trade down to 11, if you have those top 3 receivers in that class, if you view Marvin Harrison Jr. in a tier with Neighbors and Rome, and you think you can trade down, that's great, but do you want to trade down to 11? Because there's a good chance you'll have to trade back up again to get one of those 3 guys, thereby negating the value you might have gotten by trading down from 4 to 11 in the first place. Now, if you view 4 guys in that top tier, this is a non-issue. But if it's the big 3, you might have to wheel and deal some more, which is always a massive gamble to take. And I'm not sure you want to take that if you are the Arizona Cardinals, especially with how thin you are at wide receiver and how badly you need a wide receiver. Again, if you view Marvin Harrison Jr. in a tier of his own, you don't make this straight. You draft the franchise receiver. You don't make this straight. You give Kyler Murray a legitimate number 1 receiver. If you view Marvin Harrison Jr. in a tier with Neighbors and Rome and one other guy, you make this straight because you're probably going to get one of those guys at 11. If you only like 2 or 3 receivers, you do not make this trade because you're probably going to have to trade up again from the 11th spot, and you might miss out on your guy at wide receiver. It's going to be a very, very interesting situation. And on top of that, remember now, I was mentioning teams that could potentially leapfrog the Cardinals at 11 if they stand pat. The Jacksonville Jaguars, they lost Calvin Ridley to the Tennessee Titans on that 4-year deal worth $92 million, $23 million a year. They need some help at wide receiver. They could leapfrog the Cardinals. They pick number 17. Wouldn't have to give up a ton to leapfrog from 17 to 9 or 10 or whatever number you want necessarily. They wouldn't have to give up a lot of capital. Obviously, they have to give us some capital, but it's doable. It's not going to leapfrog from 17 to 2. It's doable to leapfrog from 17 inside the top 10, leapfrog the Cardinals. So the Cardinals have to trade up again from the 11 pick to 6 or 7 or 8. They have to leapfrog again. And is it worth it? Is it worth the risk? I don't know if it is. But apparently that is a report from Pretty Ricky. The Cardinals and the Vikings looking to get a deal done. So the Vikings can get JJ McCarthy with the 4th overall pick, solidify their quarterback position, hopefully for the foreseeable future, have him and Sam Darnold compete for the starting job in 2024. And then the Cardinals trade down to 11, and who knows what happens there, whether they take a receiver there or whether they're not done wheeling and dealing and they trade up to try and get one of those big 3 receivers. I don't know. Either way, if the Cards make this move, Marvin Harrison Jr., you can kiss his chances of going into the desert goodbye. It opens up the door tremendously for the Chargers. They have to be loving this news. They pick number 5. They lost Mike Williams, might need some help at wide receiver. They have to be loving this move, especially because wide receiver is pretty thin, especially because Quinn Johnson did not work out. Again, there's always a chance he could work out, but year 1 was a massive disappointment for the TCU, man. they might be able to redeem themselves by getting Marvin Harrison Jr. at pick number 5. If this news is true, Charger fans have to be loving this, and it's not unprecedented to draft a receiver back-to-back years to rectify your mistake. We saw the Philadelphia Eagles do this 2020, drafted Jalen Reagor, didn't work out, rectified the mistake in 2021 by drafting Devontae Smith, and obviously that worked out. So the Chargers could do that if the Cardinals trade down from the 4th spot to the 11th spot, as is rumored on by Pretty Ricky. But what are your thoughts? Do you think this will come to fruition? Do you think the Vikings are in on JJ McCarthy? Do you think the Cardinals will trade down? Do you think the Cardinals will draft a receiver? Do you think they stand pat and draft Marvin Harrison Jr.? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments down below. A lot of crazy stuff happening in the NFL right now. But that's going to do for this episode of JJ9 News. Be sure you like and subscribe. It helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out my main channel, Jaguar9, where we talk all things NFL history all the time. Until next time, this is Jaguar9 signing off. And as always, go Jags.